The hidden past of Charlie Kirk, who's been leading millions at age 25, has just been revealed. Charlie Kirk. What comes to mind when you hear this name? The young founder of Turning Point USA, the guy speaking in front of thousands of students on campuses, the man who leads millions with his controversial ideas. The Charlie Kirk you see on Fox News, the one you know from viral social media videos. But there are things about him you don't know yet. Very big things. This young man who's been stirring up American politics since 2012 has a past nobody knows about. And today, that secret file is being opened for the first time. This is where everything changed. December 2019. A cold evening. Charlie Kirk was sitting alone in his Phoenix office. The clock showed 11:45 p.m. Everyone had gone home, only he remained. On his desk, next to his coffee cup, sat an envelope. A thick, cream-colored envelope. No sender indicated, not even a postmark. This meant someone had hand-delivered it. Charlie picked up the envelope. It had weight to it. There wasn't just paper inside, but other things too. When he opened the envelope, do you know what fell into his hands? Old photographs, newspaper clippings, and most importantly, handwritten notes from 7 years ago. What was written in those documents? Why didn't Charlie sleep at all that night? Why did he tell his assistants the next day, "I'm not seeing anyone today"? But the most shocking thing was the identity of the person who sent that envelope. When Charlie saw that name, his world came crashing down. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Everyone who knows Charlie Kirk says he's always been a confident, determined person. Even when he graduated from Wheeling High School, he knew what he wanted to do in the future. Even at Harper College, his purpose was clear. But nobody knows that at 18, Charlie was a completely different person. The charismatic Charlie Kirk we see today, the one with an answer to every question, was much quieter and more withdrawn back then. The incident that happened in his senior year of high school. Charlie had never told anyone about this. He was giving a homework presentation in class. The topic was the American Dream. Charlie had prepared for hours for this presentation. He had thought through every word, crafted every sentence. But when the presentation ended, the class reaction was nothing like he expected. Some students were laughing, others were shaking their heads. And worst of all, his teacher. "Charlie, I don't know where these ideas of yours come from, but they don't have much to do with reality," his teacher had said in front of the class. "Maybe you should be a bit more realistic." Walking home from school that day, Charlie made a promise to himself. "One day I'll show them all. One day they'll have to take me seriously." Nobody believed in him, but Charlie believed. He believed in himself. That night, the documents in that envelope took Charlie back to those days. But the real question was, who had collected those documents? And why were they sending them to Charlie 7 years later? When the phone started ringing, Charlie startled. Who could be calling at midnight? He looked at the screen, an unknown number. Normally he wouldn't answer, but that night everything was different. "Hello? Charlie Kirk?" The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but Charlie was confused. A female voice, elderly but warm at the same time. "Yes, this is Charlie. Who is this? It's very late." "I'm sorry, Charlie. I'm Mrs. Henderson. You might not remember me, but I was your high school teacher." Charlie's world stopped. Mrs. Henderson. Of course he remembered her. She was his American history teacher, but she wasn't the one. It was Mrs. Peterson who had opposed Charlie after that presentation. "Mrs. Henderson, of course I remember you, but how did you get my number, and why?" "Charlie, I'm the one who sent that envelope." Charlie's hand was trembling. "Mrs. Henderson? But why?" "Charlie, do you remember that night? The night that changed everything for you. You went home and wrote something, a very long piece of writing, and the next day you came to my classroom. That night from 7 years ago." Charlie remembered. After Mrs. Peterson's class, he had gone home, sat at his computer, and started writing. He wrote and wrote and wrote. "You gave me that writing," Mrs. Henderson continued, "and you said, Mrs. Henderson, maybe you'll understand. Maybe you'll believe. When I read that piece, Charlie, I had never read anything like it in my life. What was in that writing, Mrs. Henderson? Charlie asked. He could hear his own voice trembling. You were writing about America's future, Charlie. But you weren't just dreaming. You were making plans. Those words coming from an 18-year-old. It was like a 40-year-old politician was speaking. Charlie was starting to remember. He had written for hours that night. He had written an article titled America's Young Voice. It was 15 pages long. In that piece, you explained how young people could get involved in politics. You wrote about how to organize on campuses. You planned how to defend conservative values. And most importantly, you were drawing the prototype for Turning Point USA. Was this possible? Had Charlie dreamed of Turning Point USA when he was 18? Mrs. Henderson, what did you do with that writing? I kept it, Charlie. I kept it for 7 years, and I followed you. Every success, every speech, every campaign. I watched you accomplish everything you had dreamed of that night. Charlie's eyes filled with tears. But why are you telling me now? Because you seem to have forgotten, Charlie. In your recent speeches, your recent interviews, I couldn't see that young Charlie's fire. Everything seemed to have become routine. That's why I sent that envelope. To remind you. To remind you who you are. The next morning, Charlie went to the office early. After talking with Mrs. Henderson, he couldn't sleep at all. He wanted to find that old writing. Did he have a copy on his computer? His assistant Sarah hadn't arrived yet. Charlie was alone, going through archive files, and then there was a knock on the door. Come in, Charlie said without looking up. When the door opened, a young girl entered. She was 20 to 21 years old, holding flowers and an envelope. When Charlie looked up, he saw that the girl's eyes were full of tears. I'm sorry, Mr. Kirk. I came without an appointment, but I wanted to thank you so much. Charlie stood up. Of course, please sit down. How can I help you? The girl sat down but was struggling to speak. I'm Sarah Mitchell from Arizona University, and you changed my life. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out a paper from her envelope, an old yellowed paper. When Charlie looked at that paper, he lost his breath. This was the article he had written 7 years ago. This, how do you have this? Mrs. Henderson was my high school teacher. She gave me this article 4 years ago. Read this, Sarah, she said. There are other young people who think like you. When I read that article, Mr. Kirk, for the first time I felt like I wasn't alone. Charlie listened in amazement. Had Mrs. Henderson given that article to other students too? After reading that article, I started a Turning Point group on our campus. We now have 200 members. And last month, I volunteered in the Arizona state elections, always thinking about what you wrote in that article. Sarah continued. Mrs. Henderson said you might have forgotten that article. But that article changed hundreds of young people's lives, not just mine. Charlie's world was changing. Hundreds of young people? Yes, Mrs. Henderson had copied that article, sent it to different schools. Her teacher friends shared it too. When I was traveling from Phoenix to Arizona, I met young people from 3 different campuses along the way. They had all read that article. That sparkle in Charlie Kirk's eyes. That's when he understood the truth. Doing politics, giving speeches, influencing millions. It all started that night. Those pages written by an 18-year-old at his computer. But more importantly, Charlie hadn't written that article alone. The real author of that article was the young spirit inside Charlie. That fire, that belief. Sarah, do you still keep that article? Of course. I read it every time I'm going through difficult times. It gives me strength. Charlie sat at his desk and opened his computer. Sarah, I want to show you something. He started going through his old files, and he found it. America's Young Voice, Charlie Kirk, 2012. When he opened the file, he saw the first sentence, "The future of this country is in our hands, and we are ready." Mrs. Henderson was right, Charlie murmured. I had forgotten. Sarah stood up. Mr. Kirk, I should go now. I just wanted to thank you. Sarah, wait. Charlie printed the document. He handed the papers to Sarah. This is your article now too. Keep it alive, share it, because I realized this story isn't just my story, this is our story. That day, Charlie Kirk sat alone in his office. In his hands was that article from 7 years ago. In his eyes, the fire of 18-year-old Charlie. But the story didn't end here. After Sarah left, Charlie decided to do deeper research on his computer. That night when he wrote the article, what had really happened? He opened his old email account. He started scanning through messages from 2012, and he found it. An email from Mrs. Henderson. Date, December 15th, 2012. The day after Charlie wrote the article. Dear Charlie, I read the article you gave me today. I'm not saying this just as an educator. I'm saying this as a mother. This writing is extraordinary. I'm going to keep this article. Because one day, maybe in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, you'll forget these words. That's when I'll remind you. Remember, Charlie, great leaders are born at young ages. You are a great leader. With love, Mrs. Henderson. Charlie's eyes filled with tears. Mrs. Henderson had been planning everything since that day. She had waited for 7 years, predicted the moment when Charlie would forget, and stepped in at exactly the right time. He called Mrs. Henderson again. Mrs. Henderson, I found that email. Which email, Charlie? The one from 2012, where you told me I was a great leader. Mrs. Henderson laughed quietly. That email, I remember. Were you really planning this since that day? Charlie, as a teacher I see hundreds of students, but in my 30-year career, I've only seen someone like you 2 to 3 times. When I read that article, I knew. This young man will either do very big things or he'll forget his own potential. What about the others? Those 2 to 3 students? One became a doctor working in Africa. The other is an engineer developing environmental technologies. And you? You're influencing millions. Charlie's voice became quiet. Mrs. Henderson, what if I had really forgotten? What if you hadn't sent that envelope? Charlie, I'm a teacher. My job is to plant seeds. You decide whether they grow or not, but I never give up. That evening, as Charlie was driving home, his thoughts were very different. Sarah's words echoed in his head. That article changed hundreds of young people's lives. Hundreds of young people. Charlie had never thought about this. The 18-year-old Charlie who wrote that article was just trying to express his own feelings. But it turned out those words were the feelings of other young people too. When he got home, his wife Erica asked him, "How was your day?" "You look a bit different." Charlie told her everything. Mrs. Henderson, Sarah, that article. Erica listened carefully. Charlie, this is an amazing story. But the most important thing is, why did you never tell me about this? Charlie stopped. Really, why had he never mentioned that article? He had been married to Erica for 4 years, but had never spoken about that night. I guess I didn't think it was important. It was just something a young person wrote. Charlie, you still don't understand, do you? That writing wasn't just a piece of writing. That writing was your manifesto, the founding document of Turning Point USA. Erica was right. That night, Charlie sat at his computer and reread that 2012 article. This time, he was looking at it with different eyes. The future of this country is in our hands, and we are ready. As young people, we have a voice, and this voice must be heard. On campuses, on streets, everywhere, we will defend American values. Freedom is not just a word. Freedom is our way of life. Every sentence was the foundation of what Turning Point USA does today. What Charlie had written at 18 was guiding 25-year-old Charlie's life. But the most surprising part was at the end of the article. One day, these ideas will influence millions. Because right ideas never stay alone. They grow, spread, come to life. Charlie had written at 18 that he would influence millions. And today, he really was influencing millions. That night, Charlie called Mrs. Henderson one last time. Mrs. Henderson, I want to ask you one last question. Of course, Charlie, go ahead. How many people did you give that article to? Mrs. Henderson thought for a moment. I don't know the exact number, Charlie. But I know this. Every young person who read that article showed it to someone else, like Sarah, and they showed it to others. So that means, Charlie, that article is no longer in your hands. That article is now living its own life. It has its own existence. After Charlie hung up the phone, he thought for a long time. What would you do? Could something you wrote at 17 change your life? Could it change other people's lives? Charlie Kirk's story shows us that sometimes the biggest changes start from the most unexpected places. That secret file actually exists in all of us. That file is our youthful fire, our dreams, our beliefs. Charlie Kirk isn't just a political figure. He's a living example of the potential inside each of us. That young man who wrote at his computer 7 years ago is influencing millions today. But more importantly, that article is no longer just Charlie's. That article now belongs to every young person who reads it. Sarah's article, the article of those 3 young people in Phoenix, and maybe your article. So what about you? What's your secret file? Where are your dreams from 7 years ago? Maybe it's time to remember them again. Because as Mrs. Henderson said, sometimes the biggest changes begin when we remember the dreams we forgot. And sometimes a teacher touches our lives at exactly the right time, with exactly the right words. Charlie Kirk's story isn't over. That article is still being read, still being shared, still influencing young people. Because powerful ideas never die. They just grow.